Chapter 3, in which the Muskrat has a terrible experience, how the Moomin family discover Hattifattener's island, where the Hemulem has a narrow escape, and how they survive the great thunderstorm. Next morning, the Muskrat went out as usual, with his book to lie in the hammock. But he had just got comfortable when the string broke, and he found himself on the ground. "Unpardonable!" exclaimed the Muskrat, unwinding the rug from his legs. "Oh dear," said Moomin Papa, who was watering his tobacco plants. "I hope you didn't hurt yourself." "It isn't that," replied the Muskrat, gloomily sucking his mustache. "The earth can crack and fire can come down from heaven for all I care. That sort of thing doesn't disturb me. But I do not like to be put in a ridiculous situation. It is dignified for a philosopher." "But I'm the only one who saw it happen," protested Moomin Papa. "That's bad enough," replied the Muskrat. "You will remember all that I have been exposed to in your house. Last year, for example, a comet fell on us. It was nothing. But as you perhaps remember, I sat on your wife's chocolate shape. It was the deepest insult to my dignity. And sometimes your guests put hairbrushes in my bed. A particularly stupid joke. Not to mention your son, Moomintroll." I know," interrupted Moomin Papa miserably. "But there's no peace in this house. And sometimes string wears out with the years, you know." "It must not," said the Muskrat. "If I had killed myself, of course, it wouldn't have mattered. But imagine if your young persons had seen me. Now, however, I intend to retire to a deserted spot and live a life of loneliness and peace, giving up everything. I have made up my mind once and for all." Moomin Papa was impressed. "Oh," he said, "where will you go?" "To the cave," said Muskrat. "Nobody can interrupt my thoughts with stupid jokes there. You may bring me food twice a day, but not before 10 o'clock." "Good," said Moomin Papa, bowing. "And shall we bring you some furniture too?" "Yes, you can do that," said the Muskrat more kindly. "But very simple things. I realize that you mean well, but that family of yours is really too much for me." So the Muskrat took his book and his rug and wandered slowly off toward the cliffs. Moomin Papa sighed to himself. Then he went on watering his tobacco plants and soon forgot about it. When the Muskrat arrived in the cave, he was very pleased with everything. He spread out his rug on the sandy floor, sat down on it, and began at once to think. He continued to do that for about 2 hours. All was quiet and peaceful, and through the crack in the roof the sun shone softly in his hiding place. Sometimes he moved slightly when the sun slid away from him. "Here I shall stay forever and ever," he thought. "How unnecessary it is to run about and chatter, to build a house and cook food and collect possessions." He looked contentedly around his new home, and then he caught sight of the hobgoblin's hat, which Moomintroll and Snufkin had hidden in the darkest corner. "The waste paper basket," said the Muskrat to himself. "Oh, so it's here. Well, it will always come in useful." He thought a little while longer, and then he decided to sleep for a bit. He rolled himself in a blanket and put his false teeth in the hat so they would not get sandy. Then he slept peacefully and happily. In Moomin House, they had pancakes for luncheon. Big yellow pancakes with raspberry jam. There was porridge from the day before as well, but as nobody wanted it, they decided to save it for the next morning. "Today I feel like doing something unusual," said Moomin Mama. "The fact that we have got rid of that awful hat is something that ought to be celebrated. And besides, one gets so tired of everlastingly sitting in the same place." "That's quite true, my dear," said Moomin Papa. We'll go on an excursion somewhere. What? We've been everywhere already. There isn't anywhere new, said the Hemulem. But there must be, said Moomin Papa. And if there isn't, then we'll make somewhere. Stop eating now, children. We'll take the food with us. Can we eat what we already have in our mouths? Asked Sniff. Don't be silly, dear, said Moomin Mama. Collect everything you want to take with you quickly, because Father wants to start at once. But don't take anything unnecessary. We can write out a note to the muskrat so that he knows where we are. Bless my tail, burst out Moomin Papa and put his hand on his forehead. I'd completely forgotten. We should have taken food and furniture to him in the cave. In the cave? Screamed Moomintroll and Snufkin at the same time. Yes, the string of hammock gave out, said Moomin Papa. And so the muskrat said he couldn't think anymore, and that he would give up everything. You had put brushes in his bed and I don't know what. So he went away to the cave. Moomintroll and Snufkin went very pale and looked at each other in horror. The hat, they thought. Well, it doesn't matter very much, said Moomin Mama. We'll go on an excursion to the beach and take the muskrat's food with him to him on the way. The beach is so ordinary, grumbled Sniff. Can't we go somewhere else? Be quiet, children, said Moomin Papa severely. Mama wants to bathe. Now, come along. Moomin Mama hurried off to pack. She collected blankets, saucepans, birch bark, a coffee pot, masses of food, suntan oil, matches, and everything you can eat out of, on or with. She packed it all with an umbrella, warm clothes, tummy ache medicine, an egg whisk, cushions, a mosquito net, bathing drawers, and a tablecloth in her bag. She bustled to and fro, racking her brains for anything she had forgotten, and at last she said, Now it's ready. Oh, how lovely it will be to have a rest by the sea. Moomin Mama packed his pipe and his fishing rod. Well, are you all ready? He asked. And are you sure you haven't forgotten anything? All right, let's start. They set off in procession toward the beach. Last of all came Sniff, dragging 6 little toy boats behind him. Do you think the muskrat has got up to anything? Whispered Moomintroll to Snufkin. I certainly hope not, Snufkin whispered back, but I'm feeling a bit anxious. At that moment they all stopped so suddenly that the Hemulem nearly got the fishing rod in his eye. Who screamed? Moomin Mama burst out in alarm. The whole wood shook with a wild howling, and someone or something came galloping toward them on the path, growling with terror and rage. Hide! Shouted Moomin Papa. There's a monster coming! But before anyone had time to move, the monster turned out to be the muskrat, with staring eyes and bristling whiskers. He waved his paws and made incoherent sounds that nobody could understand. But it was clear that he was very angry or frightened, or angry because he was frightened. Then he turned tail and fled. What has happened to the muskrat? Said Moomin Mama anxiously. He was always so calm and dignified. To get into such a state just because a hammock and cord broke, said Moomin Papa, shaking his head. I think he was angry because we forgot to take food to him, said Sniff. Now we can eat it ourselves. They continued their way to the beach, a bit disturbed in their thoughts. But Moomintroll and Snufkin sneaked off in front of the others and took a shortcut to the cave. We daren't go through that door. Perhaps a thing is still there, said Snufkin. We'll climb up on top and look down through the crack in the roof. Quietly they crawled up, worming their way like red Indians towards the opening in the roof, and looked down into the cave. There stood Hobgoblin's hat, and it was empty. The rug was thrown in one corner, the book in another. The cave was deserted. But everywhere in the sand, strange footprints could be seen, as if someone had been dancing and jumping about. It wasn't the muskrat's paws that made those footprints, said Moomintroll. I wonder if it was some other paws, said Snufkin. It looks awfully queer. They clambered down again and looked nervously around. But nothing alarming happened. They never found out what had frightened the muskrat so terribly, because he refused to talk about it. But meanwhile, the others had arrived on the beach. They all stood in a bunch down by the water's edge, chattering and waving their arms. "They've found a boat!" cried Snufkin. "Come on, let's run and see." It was true, a lovely big sailing boat, complete with oars and fishing tackle, and painted in white and mauve. "Whose is it?" panted Moomintroll when they had reached out to him. "Nobody's," said Moomin Papa triumphantly. "It has been washed up onto our beach, so we have the right to keep it as wreckage." "It must have a name," cried the Snork Maiden. "Wouldn't Peewit be rather sweet?" "Peewit yourself," said the Snork rudely. "I prefer the Sea Eagle." "No, it must be Latin," cried Hemulem. "Moominates maritima." "I saw it first," squeaked Sniff. "I must choose a name for it. Wouldn't it be fun to call it Sniff? That's so short and sweet. Just like you, I don't think." "Just like you, I don't think," said Moomintroll jeeringly. "Hush, children," said Moomin Papa. "Quiet, quiet. Obviously Mama will choose the name. It's her excursion." Moomin Mama blushed a little bit. "If only I could," she said shyly. "Snufkin has such an imagination. I'm sure he will choose much better." Snufkin was rather flattered. "Well, I don't know," he said. "But to tell you the truth, I thought from the beginning that Lurking Wolf would be rather nice." "Get away with you," said Moomintroll. "Mother shall choose." "Yes, dear," said Moomin Mamma. "Only you mustn't think I'm stupid or an old-fashioned. I think the boat should be called something to remind us of what we're all going to do with her. And so I think The Adventure would be a good name." "Marvelous!" shouted Moomintroll. "We'll christen her. Have you anything we can use for a bottle of champagne, Mother?" Moomin Mamma hunted in all her baskets for a bottle of raspberry juice. "Oh dear, how sad!" she burst out. "I think I've forgotten the raspberry juice." "Well, I asked you if you had anything, didn't I, my dear?" said Moomin Papa virtuously. They all looked at each other sadly. To sail away in a boat that hasn't been properly christened can mean the worst possible luck. Then Moomintroll had a brilliant idea. "Give me a saucepan," he said. Then he filled it with sea water and carried it up to the cave and the hobgoblin's hat. When he came back, he handed some raspberry juice to his father and said, "Taste this." Moomin Papa took a gulp and looked very pleased. "Where did you get this from, my boy?" he asked. But Moomintroll said it was a secret, so they filled a bottle with the juice and broke it against the prow of the sailing boat, while Moomin Mamma proudly proclaimed, "Herewith I christen you now and forever, The Adventure." Everybody cheered, and then they put the baskets, blankets, umbrella, fishing rod, cushion, saucepan, and bathing suits on board, and the Moomin family and their friends set for the wild green sea. It was a fine day, perhaps not quite clear, because a gold haze lay over the sun, but the Adventure spread her white sails and headed out to sea at a good speed. The waves slapped the sides of the boat, and the wind sang, and mermaids and mermen danced around the bows, while big white birds circled up above. Sniff had tied 6 little boats in a line, one after the other, and now the whole fleet sailed in the Adventure's wake. Moomin Papa steered and Moomin Mamma sat dozing. It was seldom she had such peace around her. "Where shall we go?" asked the Snork. "Let's go to an island," begged the Snork Maiden. "I've never been to a little island before." "You shall do it now," said Moomin Papa. "We'll land on the first island we see." Moomintroll was sitting farthest up in the bows, keeping a lookout for reefs. It was so wonderful to stare down into the green depths and watch the Adventure's prow cutting through the white foam. "Pee-hoo!" shouted Moomintroll. "We're going to an island." Far out to sea lay the Hattifattener's lonely island, surrounded by reefs and breakers. Once a year, the Hattifatteners collect there before setting out again on their endless foraging expedition around the world. They come from all points of the compass, silent and serious, with their small, white, empty faces, and why they hold this yearly meeting is difficult to say, as they neither hear nor speak, and have no object in life but the distant goal of their journey's end. Perhaps they like to have a place where they feel at home and can rest a little and meet friends. The yearly meeting is always in June, and thus it was that the Moomin family and the Hattifatteners arrived on Lonely Island at about the same time. Wild and tempting, it rose from the sea, wreathed in white breakers and crowned with green trees as if dressed for a gala. "Land ahead!" shouted Moomintroll, and they all hung over to the rail to look. "There's the sandy beach," cried the Snork Maiden. "And a fine harbor," cried Moomin Papa, steering skillfully into the land between the reefs. The adventure ran deep into the sand, and Moomintroll jumped ashore with the painter. The beach was soon seething with activity. Moomin Mama dragged up some stones to make a fireplace to warm up the pancakes. She collected wood and spread out the tablecloth with a little stone on each corner to stop it blowing away. And she put out all the cups and sank the butter jar in the wet sand in the shade of a stone. And finally she arranged a bouquet of beach lilies in the middle of the table. "Can we help you with anything?" asked Moomintroll when everything was ready. "You can explore the island," said Moomin Mama, who knew that was what they were longing to do. "It's important to know where we've landed. It could be dangerous, couldn't it?" "Exactly," said Moomintroll, and off he went with Snork Maiden and her brother and Sniff towards the south shore, while Snufkin, who loved to discover things alone, set off for the north. The Hemulem took his botanizing spade, his green collecting tin, and his magnifying glass and wandered into the wood. He thought he might find some wonderful vegetation that nobody had yet discovered. Meanwhile, Moomin Papa sat down on a stone to fish, and the sun sank slowly while the golden haze blotted out the sea. In the middle of the island lay a green glade with smooth floor surrounded by flowering shrubs. Here the Hattifatteners had their secret meeting place where they foraged once a year at midsummer. About 300 of them had already found their way there, and at least 400 more were expected. In the middle of the glade they had put up a high pole, painted blue. On this hung a barometer. They skimmed silently over the grass bowing haughtily to each other, and every time they passed the barometer, they bowed deeply to it. This looked a bit ridiculous. At this time, the Hemulem was rambling about in the wood, enraptured by the masses of rare flowers. They were not like the flowers that grew in Moomin Valley. Oh, far from it. Heavy, silvery white clusters which looked as if they were made of glass, crimson, black king cups, like royal crowns, and sky blue roses. But the Hemulem didn't see much of their beauty. He was too busy counting the stamens and leaves, and muttering to himself, "This is the 219th specimen in my collection." Eventually he reached the Hattifattener's hideout and wandered into it, peering eagerly around for rare specimens. He didn't look up until he bumped into the blue pole, which startled him very much. He had never in his life seen so many Hattifatteners. They swarmed over everything, and their pale little eyes stared through him. "I wonder if they're in a bad temper," the Hemulem thought to himself. "They're small, but there are horribly many of them." He looked at the big, shiny mahogany barometer. It stood at rain and wind. "Extraordinary," said the Hemulem, blinking at the sunshine, and he tapped the barometer, which sank quite a bit. Then the Hattifatteners rustled threateningly and took a step towards him. "It's all right," he said in alarm. "I won't take your barometer." But the Hattifatteners didn't hear him. They just came nearer, rustling and waving their hands. The Hemulem, with his heart in his mouth, watched for an opportunity to make his escape. But the enemy stood like a wall around him and always came nearer. And between the trees came still more Hattifatteners, with their staring eyes and silent tread. "Go away," screamed Hemulem. "Shoo, shoo!" But still they came silently nearer. Then the Hemulem picked up his skirts and began to climb up the pole. It was nasty and slippery, but terror gave him an unhemulenish strength, and at last he reached the top and got hold of the barometer. The Hattifatteners now had reached the foot of the pole, and there they waited. The whole glade was thick with them like a white carpet, and the Hemulem felt quite ill when he thought of what would happen if he fell down. "Help!" he yelled at the top of his voice. "Help! Help!" But the wood was silent. Then he stuck 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. Snufkin, who had wandered along the beach, heard the Hemulem's signal of distress and lifted his head to listen. When he had got the direction clear, he dashed to the rescue. The call became louder, and Snufkin realized that now it was quite near. He crept cautiously forward. It became lighter between the trees, and then he saw the glade, the Hattifatteners, and the Hemulem clutching on tightly to the pole. "This is a terrible situation," he muttered to himself, and then louder to the Hemulem. "Hi, however did you get the peaceful Hattifatteners into such a warlike frame of mind?" "I only tapped their barometer," moaned the poor Hemulem, "and it sank. Try to take the nasty creatures away, dear Snufkin." "I must think a bit," said Snufkin. The Hattifatteners heard nothing of these remarks because they hadn't any ears. After a time, the Hemulem shouted, "Think quickly, Snufkin, because I'm beginning to slip down." "Listen," said Snufkin. "Do you remember the time when those voles came into the garden? Moomin Papa dug a lot of poles into the ground and put windmills on them, and when the wheels went round, the earth shook so much that the voles were nervous and gave up." "Your stories are always very interesting," said the Hemulem bitterly, "but I can't understand what they have to do with my sad predicament." "A good deal," said Snufkin. "Don't you see? The Hattifatteners can neither talk nor hear, and they see very badly, but they can feel extremely well. Try to jerk the pole backwards and forwards. The Hattifatteners will feel it in the ground and be frightened. It goes right up into their tummies, you see. They're like wireless sets." The Hemulem tried to swing to and fro on the pole. "I'm falling down!" he burst out in alarm. "Faster, faster!" cried Snufkin. "Tiny little movements." The Hemulem managed a few more desperate rocks, and then the Hattifatteners began to feel uncomfortable in the soles of their feet. They began to rustle and move anxiously about, and the next minute, just as the voles had done, they took to their heels and ran. In a couple of seconds the glade was empty. Snufkin felt them against his legs as they scattered into the wood, and they stung him rather like nettles. The Hemulem slid down onto the grass, completely exhausted. "Oh," he moaned, "there has never been anything but trouble and danger since I came into the Moomin family." "Do calm yourself, Hemel," said Snufkin. "After all, you've been pretty lucky." "Wretched Hattie creatures," grumbled Hemulem. "I shall take their barometer with me anyhow to punish them." "Better let it be," warned Snufkin. But the Hemulem unhooked the big shiny barometer from the pole and stuck it triumphantly under his arm. "Now we'll go back to the others," he said. "I'm awfully hungry." When they arrived, all the others were eating pancakes and tunnyfish, which Moomin Papa had caught in the sea. "Hi!" cried Moomintroll. "We've been round the whole island, and on the farther side there's a dreadful wild cliff that goes right down into the sea." "And we've seen a mass of Hattifatteners," Sniff told them. "At least 100. "Don't mention those creatures again," said the Hemulem with deep feeling. "I can't stand it. But here, come and see my war trophy." He proudly put the barometer in the middle of the tablecloth. "Oh, so bright and beautiful!" exclaimed the Stork Maiden. "Is it a clock?" "No, it's a barometer," said Moomin Papa. It tells you if the weather will be fine or stormy. Sometimes it's quite right." And he tapped the barometer. Then he put his face into a serious crease and said, "It is stormy." "A big storm?" asked Sniff anxiously. "Look for yourself," replied Moomin Papa. "The barometer points to 00, and that is the lowest a barometer can point to, if it isn't fooling us." But it certainly didn't look as if they were fooling. The golden mist had thickened to a yellow. But it certainly didn't look as if it were fooling. The golden mist had thickened to a yellow-gray fog, and out towards the horizon the sea was strangely black. "We must go home," said the Snork. "Not yet," begged the Snork Maiden. "We haven't had time to explore the cliff on the other side properly. We haven't even bathed." "We can wait a little and see what happens, can't we?" said Moomintroll. "It would be such a pity to go home just when we've discovered this island." "But if there's a storm we shan't be able to go at all," said the Snork brightly. "That would be wonderful," burst out Sniff. "You could stay here forever and ever." "Quiet, children, I must think," said Moomin Papa. He went down to the beach and sniffed the air, turned his head in all directions and wrinkled his forehead. There was a rumble in the distance. "Thunder," said Sniff. "Oh, how awful!" Over the horizon loomed a threatening bank of cloud. It was dark blue and drove little light puffy clouds in front of it. Now and then a great flash of lightning lit up the sea. "We stay," decided Moomin Papa. "The whole night?" squeaked Sniff. "I think so," Moomin Papa replied. "Hurry up now and build a house, as the rain will come soon." The adventure was dragged high up on the sand, and on the edge of the wood they quickly made a house with a sail and some blankets. Moomin Mama filled up the gaps with moss, and the Snork dug a ditch around it so that the rainwater would have somewhere to go. Everybody ran to and fro, putting their things safely under cover. While the thunder rolled nearer and nearer, a little wind came sighing anxiously through the trees. "I'll go and see what the weather's like out on the point," said Snufkin, and, pulling his hat firmly down over his ears, he set off. Alone and happy, he ran out to the farthermost point of rock, and put his back against a large boulder. The sea had changed. It was dark green now with white horses, and the rocks shone yellow like phosphorus. Rumbling solemnly, the thunderstorm came up from the south. It spread its black sail over the sea. It spread over half the sky, and the lightning flashed with ominous glint. "It's coming right over the island," thought Snufkin with a thrill of joy and excitement. He stood facing the storm as it advanced over the sea, and suddenly he saw a small black rider on something black, like a horse with short legs. Only for a moment were they visible against the creamy white crest of the cloud bank. The rider's cloak billowed out like a wing. They rose higher. Then they were lost in a blinding network of lightning. The clouds obscured the sun and rain and was driving like a gray curtain over the sea. "I have seen the hobgoblin," thought Snufkin. "It must have been the hobgoblin's Black Panther. They really exist. Are they? They aren't just an old fairy tale." Snufkin turned and skipped back over the stones. He just reached the tent in time, for heavy drops of rain were already hitting the sailcloth, and it was being whipped about in the wind. Sniff had rolled himself completely in a blanket, and he was rather afraid of thunder, and the others sat hunched up next to one another. The tent smelt strongly of the Hemulem's botanical specimens. Now there was a terrific clap of thunder right over their heads, and their little refuge was lit again and again by flashes of white light. The thunder rumbled round the sky like a great train, while the sea hurled its biggest waves against the lonely island. "What a blessing we aren't on the sea," said Moomin Mama. "Dear me, what weather!" The Stork Maiden put her trembling paw on Moomintroll's, and he felt very protecting and manly. Sniff lay under his blanket and screamed. "Now it's right over us," said Moomin Papa, and at that moment a giant flash of lightning lit up the island, followed by a rending crash. "That struck something," said the Snork. It was really a bit too much. The Hemulem sat holding his head. "Trouble! Always trouble," he muttered. Now it began to move off to the south. The thunderclaps got farther and farther away. The lightning became fainter, and at last there was only the rustle of the rain and the sound of the sea as it broke on the shore. "I won't tell them about the hobgoblin yet," thought Snufkin. "They are scared enough as it is." "You can come out now, Sniff," said Snufkin. "It's all over." Sniff disentangled himself from the blanket, yawned, and scratched his ear. He was a bit embarrassed because he had made such a fuss. "What's the time?" he asked. "Nearly 8," answered the Snork. "Then I think we'll go and lie down," said Moomin Mamma. All this had been very disturbing. "But wouldn't it be exciting to find out what the lightning struck?" said Moomintroll. "In the morning," said his mother. "In the morning we'll explore everything and have a bathe. Now the island is wet and gray and unpleasant." She tucked them up, and then went to sleep herself with her handbag under her pillow. Outside, the storm redoubled its fury. The voice of the waves was now mixed with the strange sounds, laughter, running feet, and the clanging of great bells far out to sea. Snufkin lay still and listened, dreaming and remembering his trip around the world. "Soon I must set out again," he thought, "but not yet."